Hola and aloha, my friends. Welcome back to the Surfer's Library. I'm Billy Jack, your guide through the pages of surf history, culture, and legend. Today, in honor of Women's History Month, I'm diving into Jim Kempton's incredible book, Women on Waves, A Cultural History of Surfing, from ancient goddesses and Hawaiian queens to Malibu movie stars and millennial champions. This book is dedicated to restoring women to their rightful place in the history of surfing. Because from the very beginning, women have been in the lineup. Long before professional tours, sponsorship deals, or glossy magazine covers, women were riding waves in ancient Polynesia. They were part of the fabric of early beach communities in California. They pushed limits, challenged expectations, and carved out space in a culture that didn't always make room for them. Kempton lays out why this history matters, how these stories were sidelined, minimized, or erased, and why bringing them forward changes the way we understand surfing itself. We'll go back to the roots, tracing women's surfing to its origins and exploring how history slowly, and sometimes deliberately, shifted the spotlight away from them. So in the spirit of Women's History Month, paddle out with me as we begin rediscovering the women who were there all along and give their stories the space they've always deserved. Let's paddle out. Billy Jack here again. Before we begin, I'd like to say something up front. In this episode, I'll be reading the names of several historical Hawaiian surfers. I've done my best to learn the correct pronunciations, but I'm sure I may not get every name exactly right. Hawaiian language and names carry deep meaning and history, and I want to acknowledge that any mispronunciations are completely unintentional. My goal is to honor these women and share their stories with respect and appreciation. Thank you for understanding. Now let's paddle out. Preface. Run the world, girls. If ever there's been a subject so ripe for exploration, or so appropriate for recounting, the history of women's surfing is it. Bold, beautiful, and breathtaking, the adventures and achievements of women wave riders is an epic that has gone unsung too long. Any history is a serious undertaking, but women's surfing was made more difficult by the dearth of original sources that were readily accessible. Digging deep and assembling disparate pieces of this collective saga was painstaking but rewarding. It quickly became clear that much that has been written about women surfers is inaccurate, and most has been written by men and from a male point of view. Recent material often tended to be superficial and peripheral. A decade ago, when I embarked on a women's exhibit at the California Surf Museum, it was an eye-opening experience. Jane Schmass, our historian, and Julie Cox, our museum manager at the time, were major contributors to the exhibit. For nearly 2 years, we read, researched, and compiled content about women's achievements in surfing. Had the framework we assembled back then not been accessible, this book would have taken far longer. While we chronicled the foremost figures of surf culture, the struggles and barriers that faced women in the modern era, 1900 to today, were never really addressed. Nor were the vast number of women who contributed to this progress. We only presented surfing's key moments and major stars. Once neck-deep in writing this book, it became obvious that women's surf history is a history of surfing itself. Women have been embedded in the heart of wave riding from its ancient origins. Over my decades in the surf culture, at Surfer Magazine, Transworld, and the major women's brands I worked for, I met and became friends with many of the most remarkable women who surf. I had championed them over the years and was inspired to tell their stories in one volume. What surprised me was the ocean of new discoveries and little-known achievements that unfolded. Wave after wave of captivating stories began to take form. Like the template of a surfboard blank being sculpted, each layer revealed a more beautiful and significant shape. In the decades since my first research, women's surfing has swept forward like a rising swell, gaining height and strength each year. This book is meant to be a definitive history of surfing and intended to be seen from the woman's perspective, though of course I acknowledge my own male gender as the author. Rarely has a sporting activity carried so much athletic prowess, mental preparation, danger, and sheer beauty as the act of surfing. As a microcosm of the world at large, Women wave riders have experienced similar struggles other females have faced across many social domains. Surfing, however, presents distinctive aspects. Unlike Run the World Girls, Beyoncé's girl power anthem that played on every platform and in stadiums worldwide, the act of riding a wave is frequently done without an audience and outside of the competitive arena. Most sports are performed in a contest format. The extremely subjective nature of surfing is often more effectively experienced without the constrictions of rigid formal rules. In surfing, judgment should recognize the ballet-like attitude dancing that women in particular excel at creating. Wave riding is essentially a free-form activity whose acceptance did not become widespread until the mid-20th century. Unlike child rearing, warfare, or marriage, where social norms have been established for millenniums, surfing's gender roles and expectations are neither clear nor constant. Traditions are still in an evolutionary stage. The origins of surf culture are from a distant world, distinctly dissimilar from the technology-driven, specialized functions of our current social structure. To understand the true relationship of women on waves and its future potential, a look at surfing's ancient past is necessary, and that requires a return to the beginning. The Sport of Queens, the Realm of Goddesses, 1099 to 1899. Surfing is not just an activity. It is a part of the Hawaiian way of life. Princess Victoria Ka'iolani. It's good to be queen. In 1905, the world's oldest known surfboard was discovered in Hawaii. It dated back to the early 1600s, and it belonged to a woman. Pristinely preserved in a cool, dry burial cave on the Big Island's Kona coast, this Papahe'enelu, koa wood surfboard, is believed to have been the prized possession of Princess Kaneamuna, a 17th century Polynesian royal. It had been carefully placed next to her tomb along with a land toboggan, or papaholua, which appears to have been her version of sidewalk surfing. Like Egyptian pharaohs, Hawaiian royalty were often buried with their beloved possessions, and these were Princess Kaneamuna's favorites, one for He'enelu, surfing, and one for He'eholua, coasting on a sled. On the steep hill behind the royal village of Ho'okena, her subjects matted the long native pili grass to make a smooth, high-speed course for sled sliding. This was no substitute for wave riding, though. Princess Kaneamuna had surfboards custom-made for her amusement and rode them well. Hawaiian queens and princesses often had their own private surf spots and were among the best wave riders in their realm. One particularly fine surfing location was reserved for a single ali'i woman, a special surf at Waikiki that was taboo to everyone but the queen. Daring to ride on the royal lady's waves, one young man was severely beaten and nearly put to death. Women were equal to the men both in status and respect when out in the waves. Most of the early images from Europeans' initial voyages show women frolicking with minimal garments in the surf, while their counterparts in England and Spain wore 6 layers of clothing and shunned exposing even a sleeve to the shoreline sun. From a historical vantage point today, it conjures an almost comical juxtaposition. About the time Queen Anne Boleyn's head was rolling into the executioner's basket, Kaneamuna was rolling across the pristine surf off the Kona coast, while her entire kingdom watched and cheered. It was good to be queen, at least in Hawaii. Women, bloodlines, and surfing. Historical references to surfing and women are as old as the Polynesian culture itself. Like the culture of ancient Greece, the legends go back before any actual living figures. One of Hawaii's greatest deities, Pele, the volcano goddess, was celebrated in Polynesian mythology as a surfer of big waves. But more recent inquiries have found something unique in royal lineage. Studies of Polynesia's historical mythology disclose a fascinating revelation. Both women and surfing are central to the ranking of hereditary descendants. When ancient deities and heroic mortals met to compete and procreate, the genealogy of the royalty was determined by the goddesses and the queens who represented wave riding. Polynesian bloodlines split as various groups migrated to different regions and islands. but much of the spoken history remained intact. In each lineage, the highest bloodline was determined by the female descendants, and the dynamics of chiefly relationships were revealed through their connection to surfing. In the Tahitian legend of royal descent, Hawaii, the goddess of the waves, holds the supreme regal bloodline. In the Hawaiian version, the royal lineage is traced from the surfing deity Hina Hanai Akamalama. They are the ones who ride atop the highest crest of her parents' line. Consider the poetic theme of lovemaking that surfing implies. Hina is the female in Hawaii with which to ride this wave of high bloodline, just as Hawaii is the one to surf with upon reaching Tahiti. And just as significantly, the position of surfing deity is held not by a god, but by a goddess. Hawaiian female surfers were not just goddesses, though their history has a murky entanglement with mythology. The earliest known record of a female surfer describes a prominent Oahu chiefess named Mamala. As a kapua, a demigod or heroine with supernatural powers, she could take the form of a beautiful woman, a gigantic lizard, or a great shark. Kakaio Mamala, the ocean west of Waikiki off the coast of Honolulu, broke straight out from a beautiful coconut grove at Honoka Upu, wrote Finney and Houston in their 1966 surf history, Surfing, the Sport of Hawaiian Kings, and provided some of the finest waves in Ku, in what is now the port area of Honolulu. Mamala, by all accounts, was a wonderful wave rider. She could surf the roughest waves with skill and daring and apparently liked to paddle out to the outside breaks when the Kona winds blew into the Bay of Ku. Crowds would gather on the shoreline to cheer and applaud her for her extraordinary skill. Watching her surf, they would clap and shout in recognition to her extraordinary riding. The Mamala break was named after her, and even today maps show this name on the outer reaches of Honolulu Harbor. A legend explaining the name of Sunset Beach on Oahu's North Shore tells the story of a woman who was known for her ability to catch octopus. Asked by a chief to go to a particular reef in Paumalu, she was met on the beach by an old man. He told her that there was a catch limit at this reef and that she must not exceed it. The woman agreed, but once in the water she disregarded the warning. Suddenly, a large shark appeared and attacked her, taking off both her legs. Later, when her body was examined, the people saw the marks left by the shark's teeth. They knew that she had been punished by the guardian of the reef. After the incident, the area was named Paumalu, taken by surprise. One surfing love story involved a supernatural woman who lived in a cave overlooking the North Shore. A prince of Kauai came to surf in the breakers at Paumalu Sunset Beach. A bird maiden who lived in a cave above watched him surf, then sent her bird messengers to bring a luhua lei to him and bring him to her. After months together as lovers, the surfing season came around again. He promised to never kiss another woman, but broke this vow when a lovely female came up after his surfing and put an alima lei around his neck. The birds brought word back to their mistress. She ran to the beach, tore off the alima lei, and reclaimed him with her lehua lei. The bird woman ran back to her cave with him in hot pursuit. He never caught her, but turned to stone halfway up the mountainside. Liberty, equality, sorority. If the women's struggle for liberation and equality casts a long, dark shadow over Western societies, there was nothing but sunlight for the first female surfers in Hawaii. The oral histories and ancient myths were filled with the tales of women riding their long koa olos across the surf. English writer Isabella Bird was the first European woman to describe surfing after visiting Hawaii in 1876. It really is a most exciting pastime, and in a rough sea requires immense nerve. The surfboard is a rough plank shaped like a coffin lid, about 2 feet broad and from 6 to 9 feet long, well oiled and cared for. Females of all ages, abilities, and classes rode waves in traditional Hawaiian culture. These surfing women were seen as spiritually and physically powerful and commanded great respect in society. As historians Finney and Houston noted in Surfing, the Spirit of Hawaiian Kings, a large percentage of wahinis of early Hawaii were skillful surfers, and sometimes champions. Early engravings of the sport are full of half-dressed females perched on surfboards at the top of a curling wave. Modern surfing's portrayal of women as bathing beauties sitting on the beach faithfully watching their masculine mates ride the wild surf could not be more opposite from the origins of surf culture. In every ancient depiction, women appear in prominent, often even primary roles. Thomas Thrum published an article in 1896 entitled Hawaiian Surf Riding. A well-known journalist of the time, he wrote, "Native legends abound with the exploits of those who attained distinction among their fellows by their skill and daring in this sport, indulged in alike by both sexes, and frequently, too, as in the days of intellectual development, the gentler sex carried off the highest honors." His observation is supported from the first European account of Hawaii by Captain Cook. Cook described how a princess, meaning a woman of the ali'i, other accounts call such women chieftess, paddled her board through heavy surf to catch a ride in the rolling waves, and observed that women were equally ready to place themselves on the summit of the largest surge. In the beginning, there was sex, surf, and spirituality all in one. As Brigham Young University, Hawaii Assistant Professor Isaiah Walker has observed, although these particular historical figures were beautiful women who surfed with little to no clothing, these stories do not simply convey them as objects of male sexual desire. Female surfers are celebrated as empowered people in the waves, Walker notes. While some are remembered for their grace, style, and dominance in competitive surfing, others were known as bold and powerful surfers, even regulating men in lineups. Sex, power, pleasure, and courtship were intricately intertwined with the act of surfing, and women claimed an equal, if not the lion's share, of Mother Ocean's sensual, sacred experience. When a man and woman rode in on the same wave, sexual indulgence often followed. In one of Honolulu's first Hawaiian-language newspapers, the Nupepa Kokoa, an article appeared, 1865, describing Kahalomana Kahiko, Ancient Sports of Hawaii. In that December 23rd issue, the journalist J. Wymau wrote that at surfing contests held in older times, the men, looking like a company of soldiers of that day, would wear red-dyed malo, loincloths, and assemble on the beach. Women would make their way to the beach in matching red-dyed kapa skirts. Then they go and join together with the men in surf riding. Those who spoke of surfing with their intimate partners include Palani and Iavale of Kahana, Pili'aama and Kapu'ewae of Waimea, Oahu. Even the youngest of the goddess Pele's clan, Hi'iaka, surfed on Kauai, with the high chief Lohi'au after, as the story is told, she helped to revive him from near death. More formal courtship was also carried out in the surf when a man or woman tried to woo and win a mate by performing on the waves. Hawaiian legends abound in the tales of thwarted and successful love affairs, wrote Ben Finney, and surfing played a part in many of them. Passionate adventures of champion surfers and famous courtships that began on the edge of the ocean were recorded in Hawaii's abundant oral history. They indicate women's significance in the unwritten but extensive surfing literature of the Polynesian people. Many women surfers who displayed skills in the surf attracted the highest ranks of kapu chiefs with their beauty and mana. Kina Hanai Akamalama, wife of King Aikanaka, who rules in Rarotonga and the Tuamotuan Islands, was known as an excellent surfer. Chiefesses like Kamehameha of Kealohilani, Kalea no I no Ho'ana Api Api of Maui, Hina Hanai Akamalama of Hilo, and Mamala of Ko Harbor in Honolulu all surfed with their suitors at some point in their stories. This correlation hints at the literary evidence presented about surfing women within Polynesian oral traditions. One obvious observation: surfing has always exuded a strong sensuality, and a part of surfing's allure to both sexes is its inherent erotic context. Royal courts and supreme courting. King David Kalakaua, the Hawaiian kingdom's last male sovereign, ruled the nation from 1874 to 1891, championing a sport which had almost been extinguished by Western influence. Known as the Merry Monarch, Kalakaua is credited with helping revive the ancient traditions of both hula and surfing. He also set down a number of Hawaiian stories, many of them relating to women surfing. One of the most intriguing is the story of Princess Kelea, the beautiful sister of Maui, the ruler of that island territory. As Kalakaua told it, Kelea, the surf rider of Maui, while surfing Lahaina, was abducted by a chief named Kalamakua and taken to be married to Lolale, the king of Oahu. On the way, Kalamakua stopped at his own fiefdom on the west side of Oahu and took Kelea surfing, more than likely at the Great Break of Makaha. Kelea and Kalamakua both shared a love of surfing, and in the time they spent getting over to the Honolulu side where Kelea was to be married to his king, a secret romance began. Marriage to Lolale, the high chief of Oahu, proved problematic. Lolale didn't surf, and worse yet, didn't even like the ocean. Living inland at Lihue, Kelea was miserable, only finding happiness on the rare trips to the coast. Soon she was planning her getaway. Stealthily commandeering a sailing vessel, Kelea slipped through the reef pass, escaped from the king's clutches, and headed back to her native Maui. She made one stop, though, on the west side. She paid a visit to her abductor, Kalamakua, and instead of punishing him, Kelea rekindled their romance and swept him away to surf with her back on Maui. Queens of the Stone Age. As the sport of kings, surfing has always retained a regal status. But in reading the original texts of these histories, queens appear to be better known for their surfing prowess than kings. During the time of the Hawaiian monarchy, the entire royal family, chieftesses, princesses, and queens, were all recognized as formidable surfers. The most famous surfer of this period was Ka'ahumanu, the wife of King Kamehameha the Great, who ruled from 1782 to his death in 1819. Ka'ahumanu was known as an expert surfer and an influential woman in the culture. An 1822 engraving shows the image of a tall, voluptuous woman. Both Ka'ahumanu and her husband Kamehameha were dedicated surfing enthusiasts. According to the Hawaiian historian John Papa II, they liked to surf Kuka, a break located at Pua'a in North Kona, where a coral head stands just outside a point of lava rocks. Clearly, the regal women who surfed these reefs, or, like Kelea, escaped marriage to surf, were no timid wallflowers. And although these particular historical figures were beautiful women surfing with little to no clothing, these stories do not convey them as objects of male sexual desire. Instead, the stories portray them as agents in history, women remembered for their surfing abilities, prowess, mana, and character. Female surfers like Kelea, Ka'ahumanu, Mamala, and many others are central characters in epic legends from centuries ago. Beyond Hawaii, women surfing in the waters of Tahiti, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and Rapa Nui, Easter Island, are also mentioned in native surf lore. Teoira Henry, 1847 to 1915, was an early female ethnographer who published her grandfather John M. Orsman's manuscripts of recorded Tahitian legends. In Tahiti, Henry observed fa'ahe'e, surf riding, was highly popular with young men and women, and that surf riding is still practiced to some extent. Even the boatswain's mate on the Bounty, James Morrison, wrote in the first description of Tahitian surfing that all sexes are excellent and that the children also take their sport in the smaller surfs. Polynesian ethnographer William Ellis noted there is even mention of a patron deity that presides over surfing in Tahiti prior to Western contact. Ellis tells us about Horu or Fahi surfing, of which Hua'ori was the presiding god. Moses Manu's translation of Kea'omelemele, the grandchild of Mo'oinanea, abounds with surfers like Punahoa, Ohele, and Kea'omelemele herself, who surfs famous breaks and then bathes in the famous freshwater pools of the islands. Kea'omelemele enjoyed surfing nightly after completing intensive days of training in chant and hula at Vaiolani in Konahuenui, Oahu. It appears that Kea'omelemele's surf sessions followed by the bathing in these fresh pools restored her energy. Manu describes the time spent as rests between hula sessions, But it's almost like surfing is meant as a form of cross-training. Ranging from just a few pages to epic oral poems, stories of such women made a prominent mark on Hawaiian society for generations. Over the centuries, as Hawaii's economy became increasingly driven by tourism, marketing entities faced the challenge of assuring visitors that Hawaii's natives were safe and accommodating hosts, deftly marketing the islands with the image of passive, lifeless, scantily clad native hula girls. Next to such imagery, the historical reality of empowered female surfers became nearly invisible. Thanks to contemporary female surfers, including modern pioneers like Rel Sun and others, by the 70s, Hawaii began to see a restoration of surfing's true roots. Japan's Sonoshi surfing girls. While the act of standing upright on a surfboard appears to be first performed by the Polynesians, only recently has it been verified that Japan had a 200-year tradition of bodyboarding, and this wave riding included females. From the mid-Edo period, 1603 to 1867, Japanese-style wooden boats developed a then-new technology of timber processing that used removable floorboards called itago. Fishermen's children took these itago out of the boats and used them as boards and bodyboards. The practice was commonly known as itago nori, meaning floorboard riding. Dokurukuan Kanri, a haiku poet from Sakata in northeastern Japan, provided the oldest written documentation of itago nori in his diary after visiting Unohama Beach in 1821 and seeing children playing sonoshi, a local word meaning wave riding. By the 1880s, beaches became popular venues for healthy exercise and leisure activities. From then until the onset of World War II, itago boards became more of a wave riding tool than a boat floorboard and were widely produced and commonly ridden along the coastlines of Japan. Surprisingly, there are unmistakable images of young women using these wooden crafts with waves breaking in the background. Princess Victoria Ka'iolani. Defying a ban on surfing to keep Hawaiian heritage alive, the courageous island rose fought for her beloved kingdom like a wave-riding warrior. With the destiny of a kingdom on the line, Princess Victoria Ka'iolani, heir to the Hawaiian crown, entered the American White House in Washington, D.C. She had just sailed from the British Isles, where she had been riding her surfboard in the waves at Brighton Beach, on England's southern coast. It was 1893, a momentous year for Hawaiians. Face to face with the 24th President of the United States, the princess rose up with all her regal grace and presented an eloquent and emotional plea. 4 years ago, at the request of Mr. Thurston, then the Hawaiian cabinet minister, I was sent away to England to be educated privately and fitted to the position which by the Constitution of Hawaii I was to inherit. For all these years, I have patiently and in exile striven to fit myself for my return this year to my native country. I am now told that Mr. Thurston will be in Washington asking you to take away my flag and my throne. No one tells me even this officially. Have I done anything wrong that this wrong should be done to me and my people? I am coming to Washington to plead for my throne, my nation, and my flag. Will not the great American people hear me? Grover Cleveland, the American president, was moved. He would, he promised, take her case to the Congress and demand that they honor the legitimate Hawaiian monarchy and refuse to recognize the January 17, 1883 coup led by a contingent of powerful American businessmen attempting to annex the Hawaiian Islands. Congress's decision would determine her fate and Hawaii's future. Brilliant, beautiful, and betrayed by American financiers, Ka'iolani was no pedantic princess. Classically educated at Great Harrowden Hall in Northamptonshire, England, she spoke several languages, wrote poetry in English, Latin, and Polynesian, and was a child prodigy in art and music composition. But first and foremost, the princess was a surfer. Known to ride a long wooden board, a particularly heavy and demanding one at that, she had a reputation for outstanding performance in big surf. Women, particularly those of royal blood, were noted for their prowess and power on the waves. The Hawaiian monarchy had surfed with passion until the late 1800s, when wave riding became almost extinct as a sport. The evangelical missionaries' religious dogma had become the preeminent cultural power in the land, and for the most part they had succeeded in removing surfing from the everyday lives of the Hawaiian people. But Princess Ka'iolani, the second in line for the succession of the Hawaiian crown, was a notable exception. Disregarding the missionaries' efforts to eradicate all wave riding activities, she continued to surf daily in full defiance of the Western restrictions imposed on the Hawaiian culture. She was an expert surf rider around 1895 to 1900, recalled early 20th century surf rider Newt Cottrell, one of the founders of the Huinelu Surf Club at Waikiki in 1908. Riding a long olo board made of wili hardwood, Ka'iolani was the last of the traditional native surfers at Waikiki. There is a strong case to be made that surfing was saved from extinction by this brave, bold woman, a royal princess no less. If Duke Kahanamoku is rightfully the man who introduced surfing to the world, then Princess Ka'iolani might be the savior who made that possible. Born Princess Victoria Ka'iolani Kavekio I Lunalilo, Kalani Nui Ahila Palapa Cleghorn, on October 16, 1875, the crown princess was named after Queen Victoria and her maternal aunt, Anna Ka'iolani, who died young. Princess Ka'iolani's life and legacy are a testament to her love of the Hawaiian people in their hour of need. Ka'iolani means the highest point of heaven, or the royal sacred one, in the Hawaiian language. Descended from her first cousin Kamehameha the Great, the founder and first ruler of the Kingdom of Hawaii, Ka'iolani's mother was known as Likelike, the sister of the last two ruling monarchs. Her father was the prominent Scottish businessman Archibald Scott Cleghorn. Because Princess Ka'iolani was second in line to the throne after her elderly and childless aunt, the young girl was expected to eventually become queen. Being the first Hapahaole, half-Western, successor to the monarchy was not easy. A mixed marriage does not always run smoothly, and Princess Ka'iolani's parents struggled with the clash of their respective social traditions. Expecting to be the master of the household, Cleghorn's staunch Victorian male chauvinism clashed with the Hawaiian nobility's belief that regardless of gender, royalty's decisions should rule supreme. Her mother's deathbed prophecy. When Ka'iolani was just 11 years old, Likelike fell ill and never recovered. Legend has it that a large school of bright red fish, an omen of death in her family, massed close to the shore, and that Likelike predicted her daughter would never marry and never become queen. The reigning monarchs King Kalakaua and Queen Kapiolani talked with Cleghorn and the princess about preparing her for her royal role with a British education. Sent to Northamptonshire, England in 1889 at the age of 13, Ka'iolani was given a private education, excelling in her studies of Latin, literature, mathematics, and history. She studied French and German and took lessons in tennis and cricket. Growing up knowing the landscape painter Joseph Dwight Strong from her uncle's court, and Isabel Strong, a lady-in-waiting under her mother, she showed an early talent for art and took several trips to Scotland and France to study. Isabel was the stepdaughter of Scottish novelist Robert Louis Stevenson of Treasure Island fame. Ka'iolani and Stevenson became good friends, and he called her the Island Rose in a poem he wrote in her autograph book. Moving to Brighton in 1892 felt like a fresh start for Princess Ka'iolani, who continued to study in England for the next 4 years. Surfing was her great joy, and there is explicit evidence that she surfed the beaches of Brighton on England's southern coast quite frequently. Chaperoned and tutored by a Mrs. Rook, who set up a rigorous curriculum, the resort by the sea pleased the princess with its consistent surf. As Mrs. Rook reported, the princess loved being on the water again, the bracing sea air giving her renewed energy. Arranging for her to have an audience with Queen Victoria as part of a trip around Europe, her Hawaiian overseers had to suddenly cancel all plans in late January of 1893. It was the news of the moment which had brought her to the White House to plead with President Cleveland. A short telegram announced the shocking message: Queen deposed, monarchy abrogated. Break news to princess. Refusing to remain idle while the nation she loved was illegally stolen from her people, She gave a fiery, impassioned statement to the English press and headed for the American capital. It was to be a bitter experience. Treating Ka'ialani with contempt, the pro-annexation press referred to her imprint as a half-breed, calling her dusky, although she was saved from the blatantly racist treatment repeatedly given to her aunt, the Queen of Hawaii. Typical of the time, positive accounts of the princess's appearance often tried to emphasize what was thought to be white about her. Occasionally, even her British father, Archibald Cleghorn, was disparaged by the American writers fearing Great Britain as a rival for possession of the islands. A queen without a country. Returning to Europe to finish her education, her world further imploded when her cherished childhood friend, Robert Louis Stevenson, died. And then came the news that a new Republic of Hawaii had been established, in her absence and against her will. Despite her exhortations to U.S. President Grover Cleveland, who brought her plight before Congress, her efforts could not prevent the annexation of her homeland. Arriving back in Hawaii, she now found herself an heir without a throne. The day Hawaii was annexed as a territory of the United States, August 12, 1898, citizen Ka'ialani and her aunt, the Hawaiian kingdom's last monarch, wore funeral attire to protest what they considered a criminal coup d'etat. It was bad enough to lose the throne, Ka'ialani wept, but infinitely worse to have the flag go down. Shortly thereafter, her half-sister, Annie Cleghorn, and her English guardian, Theophilus Harris Davies, both died, leaving the princess without close friends or family, a stranger in a strange land, adrift and abandoned. A great sadness overwhelmed her. In her heartbreak, her health started to decline. She thought the warm, familiar waves of Hawaii would help her recover, but her condition continued to deteriorate. Even the new house her father had built for her couldn't lift her spirits as she struggled to readjust to the loss of her future kingdom, vanished like a windswell. Urged by her father to continue making public appearances, the futility of her efforts instead caused her to become more withdrawn and emotionally exhausted. In a stalwart effort to find a path forward, a glimmer of future contentment shone. She found a fond companion and announced her engagement to Hawaii Prince David Kavananakoa. But even that was not to be. Riding in the mountains of Hawaii in late 1898, Ka'ialani was caught in a storm and came down with a fever leading to a fatal case of pneumonia. Princess Victoria Ka'ialani would die soon thereafter of inflammatory rheumatism on March 6, 1899, at the age of 23. Her mother Liki's ominous prediction had finally come true. Ka'ialani was never able to marry and would never become queen. She was the last in a line of tragic Hawaiian royals whose sovereign nation was usurped by would-be colonials. It was an irony compounded by the fact that America had only a century before thrown off the bonds of a foreign power and demanded self-rule themselves. One silver lining in her legacy remains. Fighting valiantly but vainly to save her country, Princess Ka'ialani preserved a precious piece of Hawaii that every wave rider so cherishes. She kept on riding waves, and in doing so, saved surfing for all generations to come. Well, that is going to do it for today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed our selections from Jim Kempton's amazing book, Women on Waves, A Cultural History of Surfing, from ancient goddesses and Hawaiian queens to Malibu movie stars and millennial champions. In honoring Women's History Month, we're not just revisiting the past, we're helping restore balance to the story of surfing itself. The women in these early chapters weren't side notes, they were foundational. They were present at the beginning, and they've been shaping surf culture ever since. I hope you're going to join us again for our next episode as we move forward in this book. We'll continue uncovering the stories of the queens, pioneers, rebels, competitors, and champions who refuse to be erased. Their legacy isn't just about waves ridden. It's about barriers broken and space claimed in a sport that continues to evolve. If you enjoyed this episode, it'd mean a lot if you shared the podcast with a friend who loves surfing, surf culture, or just a good story from the past. If you'd like to help support the podcast, you can visit buymeacoffee.com/The Surfers Library to do so. Your support helps cover the platform fees that keep the show going each month. Also, if you'd like to sponsor the podcast or have any story ideas or feedback for the podcast, please contact us on Instagram or at thesurferslibrary@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, keep your toes on the nose, your stoke high, and always, always, always support your local surf shop. I'll see you in the lineup. Jim Kempton is a pioneering figure in the surf and action sports world. An author, editor, screenwriter, and historian whose work has appeared in leading surf publications, as well as major outlets like the New York Times and Time. He currently serves as executive director of the California Surf Museum and previously held top roles including editor and publisher of Surfer Magazine, group publisher at Transworld Publishing, and media director for Billabong. Earlier in his career, he worked at Surfboards Hawaii in Encinitas and traveled extensively during the 1970s era of surf exploration, helping introduce surfing to Europe and launching the influential Global Surf Report, which later became part of Surfer Magazine. An award-winning screenwriter and author, Kempton wrote Big Wave Guardians and The Shape of Things, the Dick Brewer story, both recognized at multiple film festivals, along with other surf-focused projects. He has authored 4 books, including Women on Waves, a history of women surfing that won the Southern California Book Festival Award for nonfiction, as well as First We Surf, Then We Eat, Surfing, the Manual, and the San Onofre Surfing Club. Born on Guam and raised in the South Pacific, he has surfed or lived in more than 30 countries and holds an MBA in International Business and a BA in Journalism, studying in England, Hawaii, and San Diego.